Exactly. Was the place. And have you seen any first-hand examples of, let's just stick with assimilation, examples of assimilation and examples of isolation? Have you guys seen any examples like that?
I certainly have. My first, I would say assimilation integration, unfortunately, actually, Abdullah, is actually the norm. Very few people can achieve this balance that the Sheikh was saying about we can live here and not threaten our Islam. Unfortunately, in my opinion, integration and assimilation is just a code word. In other words, the host country absorbs immigrants, strips them of their language, their culture, their religion, and eventually they become Americans or English or French. And all that remains is their name is Ahmed or their last name is wherever they come from.
How many examples have we seen from
I think almost the majority. I think almost the majority have. You know, they have girlfriends now and they maybe drink alcohol. Unfortunately, I would say the majority have fallen to this trap of assimilation.
Awesome. What about you? Have you?
Well, I mean, it happens like you're saying. It happens a lot, and it happens to the majority. But there are, cases where you'll find certain youth do try and hold on to their religion and even their culture. I remember some friends of mine's back in Connecticut where we were playing basketball. And we were similar. We were playing with non-Muslims, and it was time for Isha prayer. And it was something that actually, at the time, I'll admit, even myself, like I wasn't really too keen, but it was time for prayer, and these group of brothers, they were like, hey, let's stop and pray, right here. I was like, right here, and they were like, yeah, here. Well, let's go to the mosque. They were like, oh, we can pray here, no problem. So then, we prayed on the side of the basketball court,
So, mashallah, that's a fairly positive example.
Very positive.
Do you think isolation may be a reaction to assimilation or the fear of assimilation? Do you think that might be the case?
I think usually the people that isolate are maybe older in age, have come from the old country, wherever they may be from, and they're scared of the outside culture. Because it is a bit of a shock when you immigrate somewhere, and you need to have a balance, like the Sheikh said, but that's not always easily achieved. So I think, like, for example, my grandmother's from Greece. She just sits in her house. It's as if she's in Greece now. She's living in California 40 years. She doesn't really speak that great English. She just sits in her home. So I think the young kids aren't really isolationists. That was my experience in San Francisco.
Sheikh, let's continue on the theme of isolation. Perhaps let's start with the negative idea of isolation. Now, the whole idea in the past, in England, America, and the West, has been the idea of multiculturalism, where people can exist together but still maintain this identity. Do you think that's worked, or has that produced isolationism itself?
First of all, I need to emphasize that isolation is not a problem in the West now, because most of the people, they go for assimilation, and they need actually to live together, and they need to integrate with each other. In the old generation, especially for the Muslims who came to those countries, they had a few opportunities, job opportunities. They did not have good positions in those societies. They worked in factories and they worked in some jobs, which did not actually qualify them to integrate positively. But nowadays, if you look at the Muslims living in US and in England and in France, alhamdulillah, they had jobs. The young kids, alhamdulillah, they go to school, they enjoy all the normal life of the French and the British and the Americans. So they already integrated. The point of multiculturalism, it is something which is theoretical, and it is difficult to apply and adopt in our life, because people, there is number one, people run away from the divine now, either in Christianity and in Islam.
Totally.
So emphasizing on the cultural things are not a successful point. And number two, in Islam, we cannot actually sort people by race and by their ethnic groups and whatsoever. All people are equal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُم شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. O people, we made you peoples and tribes, mainly for the purpose of to know and to recognize each other. So in Islam, it is not practical. and it actually adds to isolation and sorting people according, and it's actually against also the da'wah and against the Islamic point of view, which is Islam calls for integration and cooperation for spreading the word of Allah, because a Muslim have a responsibility before Allah that he spreads the trust that he is given. This trust is actually spread through the good manners, through the way that he handles. And the Prophet ﷺ had a good hadith about it, when he compared a person who is isolated by himself and another person who integrates and he is patient for the harms that he received through people. And he said the second is actually more privileges and is preferred to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the first. Because the one who just lives by himself and for himself, he's not a proactive citizen. He's not a proactive element in his society. And we have a lot of examples which gives us proofs of how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam integrated in the society of Mecca. For example, when the Prophet when he migrated to Medina, the first thing that he was caring about is to return the trusts that he was entrusted with for the people of Quraysh, and he gave Ali this responsibility. He did not treat that community as disbelievers or infidels, and he should actually leave them, and he should not actually participate with them. And the Prophet ﷺ in Hilf al-Fudul, this is a treaty that was held in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. And the Prophet ﷺ had a good statement after Islam. He said, لو دعيت لحلف مثله, if I am invited to a treaty like this, I would like actually to participate. Why? This treaty or this hilf or this assembly that they form, it is mainly for the sake of supporting the oppressed and helping the weak and giving support to people who are dealt and treated unjustly. So the Prophet ﷺ justified the reason of even participating in that treaty, which was held with non-Muslim, for the sake of supporting the others. And this justifies us actually of what we can call a collective welfare of the community. So there is no problem for a Muslim to help and to cooperate and to work together with a non-Muslim for feeding the poor, for helping the one who is oppressed, for supporting some of the human rights, for advocating some of the issues and the principles which are in full conformity with Islam. We hear about even participating in some demonstrations in the West, for example, to support some issues for Muslims, like for people in Gaza, and for some welfare. There is no problem for facing problems like the drugs and violence and all of those issues in the West. All of them, there is no problem. There is no need to be isolated. There is a lot of proofs in Islam and a lot of positive and brilliant and shining things and examples which support the idea of positively participating in those things.
Guys, do you, I mean, certainly from my own experience of Muslims living in the West, I found them to be very much isolated from mainstream society. And I think it's as perhaps you were saying, Malik, earlier, that it does tend to be the older people, but that trend of thought does continue to the young people, where they become confused and they live in a community which literally it's all from a certain country,
right?
And they there's a few of them who might have jobs where they interact with non-Muslims, but most of them are all working for themselves. I mean, have you found similar experiences for that?
In San Francisco, we have a large Yemen community, and it's very big, mashallah, and they have a big masjid, and it's very nice. But like you said, sometimes the youth, they stay really within that community, they don't really branch out. Because in America, we're sitting here, we have McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, we have women on TV, we have all these things bombarding us right when you step out your door. So sometimes I think it's a natural reaction to go back inside. So I think the trick is what the Sheikh said, is try to find a blessing. I think it's similar in New York as well.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, there was one case where there was this one brother, he was really isolated. I mean, like, he wouldn't even come to the mosque to that extent, you know.
Okay.
And I remember, we would try and invite him, to come to the mosque. We haven't been seeing you. What happened? So it was like he went into a sort of like a trance, so to say. And I remember trying to relate with him, but then, and this is what I would like to ask you, Sheikh, because he did come with a pretty, solid or tangible, excuse or explanation, because he brought up the case of the, Ashab al-Kahf, the people of the youth of the cave. And basically, it was sort of like he was saying that, his personality was, he knew his weaknesses. So he was saying, like, in his case, it's all right for him to be isolated.
Do you have communities, that sort of Islamic communities, supposed Islamic communities, which gather together on the basis of their own identity in terms of where they're from, like the Yemen community or the whatever community it might be? Does that happen in New York?
That does happen, yeah. Of course, back in New York, our community is more so Bangladesh, Pakistani.
Do you find that they are keeping to themselves more? Are they quite isolationist, or are they opening up a little bit?
I wouldn't say it's like really. It's more so because they are more so the people who are living in that community.
Okay. Okay.
And
we're going to have to stop you there, Hassan,
okay.
inshallah. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us and don't go away. We'll be right back.
My world is bright. Islam is my sight.
Let's talk.
So this is something that you have to point out to them in the Bible.
Something which is, I think, very direly needed by the youth, which is staying firm on the truth.
This is just one of the greatest examples for me of how to control your anger.
Within the framework of being the cleanest religion, the cleanest jurisprudence, and in the meantime, the kindest religion to animals.
Watch Let's Talk with Khalil Amanet as he interviews guests and discusses a variety of topics, everything from youth issues to religious issues. Join us here on Huda TV.
Now my world is bright. Islam is my sight.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back here to the studio on Straight Path. Just before the break, we were looking at isolationism and its problems, and I'd like to focus with you, Doctor, now on the dangers that isolationism may produce for the Muslim community who are gating themselves and putting themselves away from mainstream society.
First of all, I noticed that as long as a community is isolated, by isolation I hear it is when we adopt cultural Islam, like for example Pakistani Islam, Egyptian Islam, Arab Islam. This is what we can call, this is a type of isolation. And the communities who adopt that, they in fact give a greater room for their children and for their families to be more assimilated in the non-Muslim country or in the non-Muslim society. Number two, this is against the basic principles of Sharia, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded all of us as Muslims, integrated, helping each other and loving each other. And this is the reason that Islam assimilated in its crucible all the other arrays of people from different countries, from different ethnicities, from different backgrounds. And this is the core of success of Islam. We heard about Bukhari, Tirmidhi and Nasa'i, those pioneers of Islamic civilization. They were not actually Arabs. So Islam is not restricted to the Arabs. Islam is not restricted to the Pakistani. And when we look different in front of the non-Muslims, Islam is shown as weak. And we are not, when we are not integrated with each other, and the Prophet ﷺ said about it, it is tribalism. And Islam actually condemned that, and the Prophet ﷺ said, leave it, because it is rotten. And he announced it actually, Salman the Persian, he said, Salmanu minna ala al-bayt. He is amongst us. He belongs to us. Because according to the greater share of contribution that he does for Islam, this is a greater share that he has in the community.
SubhanAllah.
Islam is based on the contributions and on the great participation that a person can introduce for his religion and for his fellows.
And in fact, Sheikh, you're exactly right, because that's also my finding, is that Muslims in the West are divided up by masjid, by mosque, and by area. So you will have, in this mosque, this is a Yemeni mosque, and all the Yemenis pray. And this is all the Somalis, and this is where the Somalis pray. And this is what we are dividing up into in the West.
This division actually is a result of the general feeling of weakness, and the general feeling of mistrust, and the general feeling of the way we criticize each other. Because in fact, when we left some of those of the people, when they left their countries, they left most of the basic principles of integration within the Muslim community, and they brought up with defects, and they started to raise those defects against each other. So we could not actually live with each other. We have a common aqidah, common basic Islamic creed, and we have some other differences which are related to Islamic law, according to the way that we present Islam, according to the methods that we present each other. So the scholars agreed that we should justify each other on things which are controversial, but we gather together on things which are common. This is simply to benefit from each other and to save our children and our families. So once we do not have this is one of the targets actually of the non-Muslim countries. When you see Muslims nowadays, these are Salafis, and they are labeling us and labeling people. These are Salafis, these are Ikhwani, and those are Pakistanis, these are Yemenis, and those are spreading this spirit of tribalism weakens the Muslim community and deprives us from helping each other and benefiting from each other. And this is
I'd just like to just rephrase that to the viewers there, because I think that's one of the most important things that's probably been said on Huda TV, and that is the fact that when Muslims go to the West, they raise up their defects, they leave behind their Islamic culture, they raise up their defects or those sort of slightly un-Islamic concepts, and as a result, instead of getting together on what we agree on and becoming uniting on what we agree on, we're actually raising up the defects and we're fighting over what we disagree on.
And it gives us a very bad impression in front of the reverts.
Terrible.
And it sometimes does not support the case of Islam in front of the others.
Guys, do you see any truth in what the Sheikh is saying there?
Well, I wanted to take it on a more personal level, isolation on a personal level. Like for example, this friend of ours that we had, in his case where he was isolating himself from the Muslim community because of personal issues, like and giving proof or saying stuff like giving the example of Ashab al-Kahf and
the people of the cave.
People of the cave,
exactly.
the youth of the cave. And so what would you say? What would I say to someone?
Even the context itself, and for the people of the cave, they were a few number of people living in a non-Muslim country, and the whole community rejected them, and they are not able to announce their Islam and to practice their Islam freely. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them to us as an example of people who strengthened their aqidah, but later on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them as in the form of a miracle. In the form of a miracle. Number one, the miracle is not a standardized rule to adopt. Number two, the positive, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to our Islamic law, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not isolate himself and the people. But the Prophet ﷺ invited Mus'ab ibn Umair, for example, to migrate to Medina, and Mus'ab ibn Umair spread Islam through his good manners. And most of the support the Prophet ﷺ received later is simply because of Mus'ab ibn Umair. And he gave a good, decent da'wah to the people, and he did not prefer actually to be isolated. And Mu'adh ibn Jabal and most of the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, they integrated and they practiced Islam and the people fall with them. So in the non-Muslim countries, it is an urgent need, because the non-Muslims will come on the day of judgment and they would ask us, you did not present Islam for us. And I'm afraid that they would bring up and drag our necks to the hellfire and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, those people did not present Islam for us, they did not present the Quran to us.
Subhanallah.
We do not, on the other side, you cannot actually isolate yourself. You cannot isolate your family. You are living in a globalized world where the internet and the TV and all the barriers are broken down. We are supposed to build greater barriers in the heart, which emphasizes your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for love for your religion. And from this tenet, you can leave your child everywhere. Building the barriers and building some precautions for your family is a necessity. But at the same time, you need to build a higher level of consciousness inside the heart. So you need actually a child who goes to the school freely and he can defend his religion. A child who goes to the school and he can say, this is pork is haram, I cannot eat it. And he is strong to defend it and he's proud to do it. But not a person who is weakened, isolated, who cannot support his case, cannot support his religion.
Just before we go into trying to strengthen the Muslim character and have a look at the Muslim character and looking at the right way to integrate, let's just focus on the other negative, which was obviously isolationism was the first one. Now let's look at assimilation, and this is something that I know you feel quite strongly about, as we all do as Muslims, that Muslims are immigrating to the West, and what's happening is they're losing their total identity and they become totally, I found even examples for myself. Obviously, I won't name them, but you know, an Arab brother from Algeria, and you know, 10 years in England, and he came to me, and honestly, I don't think he even forgotten how to read the Quran, and it was a shocking thing for me, but that's the extent it can get to.
Even there are a lot of examples, not only to read the Quran. You know, some people, they sometimes go to homes and they practice da'wah. I met some of them in California, and they go into the yellow pages, they pick up names which are seemingly Muslims, and then they go and knock doors and give them da'wah and invite them to the masjids. They give me amazing stories about it, even in the town that I lived in. They said sometimes they picked up the name of a Muslim, like Mahmoud, Muhammad, Ahmad, whatsoever, Ali, and then they knock on the door and they discover that he is no longer a Muslim. It just family name is a Muslim. And this is widespread in Latin America, because most of those people, there are a lot of people, majority of people, they were Muslims, like last name Al-Ghazales, or there are a lot of names that they were originally Muslim and then they were assimilated completely. Another example of a man who he was Palestinian, and then his wife came to the Islamic Center. I heard this story from one of the brothers, imams in Latin America. And they said the woman came and she wanted to wash the body of the man because she know that he was a Muslim. When they wanted to wash the body, she said, no, this is not the way I need. You need to bury him without washing the body. And they buried him like this. He forgot even to tell his children about Islam. And this is a catastrophe, my brothers, subhanAllah, because in the West, we have two types of people. We don't have a middle path. The first steps that you put your feet on Europe or in US, you have two directions. Either to go to the masjid and you become a dedicated Muslim and you participate in the Muslim community and you build up a balanced life of participating in a non-Muslim country and also in helping the Muslim country. Those are the happiest and the most successful people. And the other way are people who are detached completely from the Muslim community and they live for themselves. And unfortunately, some of them, they worship money and they worship their lusts and they become completely assimilated. And the problem doesn't fall in themselves, because if they lose themselves, it's easy alone. But they lose their families and their offspring, because they live and they deprive them of this Islam. And they don't like to live it, and they don't like actually to have any connection with the Muslims, and they feel ashamed if their names are actually And this is completely wrong because they detach themselves from the source of happiness. With the process of time, they will have contradiction in their lives. Why? Because Islam is built on a balanced life of what you call the material life and at the same time on the spiritual life. So we need to have that kind of balance. Those two examples are widespread, and some of them they do not enter the masjid except in one case, when they are carried for making janazah on them. This is a catastrophe, subhanallah.
And it is totally true. I mean, I have so many examples of this, I can't.
The shaitan comes to the heart of those people through different angles. Number one, they are fascinated with the Western civilization and Western culture. And they do not look at the chronic diseases that are widespread actually in the West, like the family ties, like drugs, like drinking alcohol, like a lot of problems that are widespread, the material life that they are living. There are huge amounts of diseases that are actually covered. The people feel that they live in welfare, but they do not achieve happiness. Number two, they feel weakened. They lack trust. They mistrust Islam. Those Muslims who leave their religion, they mistrust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have a deep feeling of inferiority complex. They have lack of knowledge. They are uprooted of their history of Islam. And they do not live with the Muslim community. They do not have a sense of, so they actually pick up the faults of Muslims, but at the same time they do not look at the same mistakes, and the same problems in the non-Muslim
community. They never look at themselves. They never look at themselves. And we as an ummah, we are the same, aren't we? And I mean, everywhere, you know, it's always not my fault. It's always the other person's fault. It's always I'm actually good. I'm, you know,
Perfect, right?
and I need also to give a message for those brothers and sisters, because they are brothers and they are Muslims, and sometimes they have fear from the Muslims. Some of the times they do not like to integrate with the Muslims, and they are completely assimilated. And this is another message which is directed also to the followers of Islam, to the good Muslims, because when a Muslim who is not actually, multazim, a person who is not following Islam, and he enters the masjid, all the people are gazing at him, are looking at him, and this is a mistake. The Prophet ﷺ put everybody in the proper picture. As long as he's your brother, even if he is committing mistakes. When a man came to the Messenger ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of Allah, can you? I will accept Islam. Can you just allow me to commit adultery? This is the only thing that I need from you." You can imagine when a man coming to the Prophet ﷺ and asking him to give a reason to commit fornication, adultery. What did the Messenger ﷺ? Did he slap him? Did he drive him away? Did he feel gloomy? He sat with him and he discussed the issue with him. And he said, "Do you accept that for your mother? My mother? Committing adultery? Fornication? Something which is hated. Something that I did not." Then the Prophet ﷺ put him in the picture. "Do you accept it for your aunt? Do you accept it for your... So why do you accept it for the people?" So the man said, "No, I'm not going to do." And when the Bedouin came to the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ and he started urinating, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba started to hit him, even to kill him. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, do not cut it. Leave him. Let him continue his urination." And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Just pour some water." And later the Sahaba, and then the man made a dua, prayers to Allah, and said, "Oh Allah, have mercy on me and Muhammad, and don't have mercy on anybody else." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, don't confine the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this." My point is that the Muslim brothers in the masjids, they must absorb those brothers and sisters and give da'wah and good, accept them as is, and then give them the opportunity to see, give them the opportunity to follow, give them a room to learn, because they did not receive Islam, they do not have channels, and there are a lot of attractions here and there to get them.
We're going to take a short break. A very important message from the Sheikh. We have to integrate with the non-Muslims, and we have to integrate with our brothers and sisters, the Muslims. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum.
My world is bright. Islam is my sight.
The main concepts of Islamic economics? How is it different from the Western theories?
And the beauty about Islam is not that it just came as a religion to perfect the relationship of the servant of Allah with Allah, but also it came to perfect the relationship of the servant of Allah with others. The beauty about Islam, Islam comes and brings the interest of the public and the interest of the individual together.
How is Islamic banking different from the traditional banking system?
The concept of riba is that I lend you money, I give you a loan, in return that you give me back that loan with an extra at the top.
The idea of the stock market itself is halal or haram.
So these are the main conditions that the scholars put with regards of the share market.
Now my world is bright. Islam is my sight.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our last segment of this episode of Straight Path, in which we are discussing assimilation, integration and isolationism. Now in this last segment, what we want to focus on is how do we integrate in the right way? We've discussed the two negative aspects of migration and the way we as Muslims seem to have ended up. Perhaps we are isolating ourselves away, hoping to protect our deen, or we are assimilating and we are losing our own identity. So to start with, Doctor, I'd like to look at what makes a Muslim a Muslim? What's the identity of a Muslim? Just to sum up some of the things that which will allow us to lead into the things we should be protecting as a Muslim.
Some people, they think that the identity of Muslim is represented in the way he is dressed, or in the way that he seems, or he has a beard, or he has a short dress or something. No, this is the outer garment which is not actually obligatory in Islam. The identity of Muslim stems from his aqeedah, Islamic creed. He is unique in the way that he worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and he adopts the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That comprehensive way goes through the details of his life. So it affects his manners and behaviors. For the Muslim, ends do not justify the means. For Muslim, he is dealing all people fairly and in a just way. He is sincere with the people, either Muslims or non-Muslims. He is following and he is abiding by all the contracts that he had. He is integrating with everybody with the sole goal and objective of giving him a good example of a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in education, in his way of living, in his manners and behavior, and before all in his aqeedah. And in the Quran, following the Quran, so he has boundaries, things which are halal and haram, regardless of the land that he lives in and regardless of the time that he lives at. So he is a Muslim in all situations. He is not changing. He's not a yes man. When the people are good, he is good. When the people are evil, he is evil.
He's not a
No,
yes
he
man.
has. He is a man of principles. This is the identity of Muslim, either at times of weakness or at strength. Umar ibn al-Khattab, and the source of his glory is in Islam, and he's proud of Islam. He's not hiding behind Islam. No, he is supporting Islam and saying and announcing that I am a Muslim, because he is convinced with the case that he has.
I think you were going to mention just there Umar bin Khattab when he was entering Jerusalem.
Exactly. When Umar ibn al-Khattab entered Jerusalem, and Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah invited him, and they had protocols and the kings and knights and all of that, and a piece of food fell. So Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah criticized Umar, because he said, why you are picking up this piece of food? This is not the etiquette. And he looked at him and said, Abu Ubaidah, we are people. You want to leave the sunnah, you want me leave the sunnah of my beloved one Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the sake of those people? We are people who gained the glory. We gained the Jerusalem. We gained the glory through this Islam. So if we find or if we seek after glory in any other religion or any other thing, Allah is going to humiliate us.
كنا أظلم ناس.
نعم كنا أذل الناس فأعزنا الله بهذا الإسلام. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us glory. This thing is not actually acquired by just making a Muslim or a child. No, it is through practice. When the parent himself feel proud of Islam, feel proud of teaching his children, feeling removing the complex of inferiority from his heart, and he's practicing Islam freely. For example, being integrated does not mean that you should commit haram.
No.
And for example, being a successful, I heard about one of my friends, and he was a physician. He's a Muslim. He doesn't shake hands with women because there is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which prohibits a man from shaking hands with women. And he said, I got, alhamdulillah, the ideal doctor of my hospital for maybe 1 or 2 times. Why? Because it doesn't affect the way that he treats people. He is nice, he's decent. In Islam, for example, when he is with a patient, he goes to asking for a mahram, another person actually to enter with him the same room. So practicing your religion does not affect your cooperation with the non-Muslim community. Practicing your Islam and freely doing it does not necessarily mean that you are a non-Muslim. No, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba integrated and helped and they spread Islam through the good impression that they gave the people. So we need actually to strengthen that feeling within the hearts of our children. We need also to show our children Muslims in big gatherings. This is the reason that some of the scholars said, if you are not able to practice Islam freely and publicize it in front and make it public in front of people, it's preferred to migrate from this place. So invite the Muslims not to migrate from the West, because some people, they have urgent needs of living in the West. Like for example, they are born in those countries and they are citizens, they cannot travel. We invite those people actually to strengthen that feeling by practicing going to big gatherings. Invite your children to go to Umrah and Hajj, to read about the history of Islam. When he goes, for example, to Mecca and he sees 3-5 million, and he is inviting and saying, look, there are other 5 Muslims, they are praying at the same time, you are a part of those 5 million. So have that kind of strength. When he goes to big conferences and big gatherings of Muslims, it emphasizes that kind of identity, of Muslim identity.
Sheikh, some people may not have the opportunity to perhaps gather in a big gathering or go to Umrah Hajj. I hope they always would, or they will. So what could we do at home to strengthen our own identity as a Muslim and the identity of the children in a family sense?
In the family sense is through knowledge, because we should be fully convinced that in outside world they are not going to teach our religion, Islam, the religion of Islam, and they are being influenced by a lot of great massive attitudes. So we need to emphasize on building trust in this religion through the home, daily sessions, halaqas, practicing Islam at home, because it's so difficult for a parent or a father or a mother to call his children to accept Islam, to be proud of Islam, and they do not pray at home. They do not pray together. This is the reason the Prophet ﷺ invited us to pray the supererogatory prayers inside the home, to give a good example for the others. Recitation of the Quran, explaining the Quran, reading the history of the Sahaba, reading the history of Islam, going for other visits with other Muslims who are with the same trend, trying to make our gathering Islamically. Why should, when we gather together, just make it for the sake of dunya? Why, when we sit together as families, why we do not bring a book, Arba'in Nawawiyya, whatever, and we try to read it together? Why we don't emphasize on Assalamu alaikum, Jazakumullahu khairan, the statements of Islam which emphasize that deep sense, and the children ask about it. Some of those steps that we need to move our homes to become schools for Islam, not by dictation, not by commands, do and don'ts, with mercy, with love, and giving alternatives and reasons
and knowledge,
which is very important.
Of course, many of these things are very important, especially because we are faced with a deluge, a huge swamp of information and ideas, particularly in the West, and not just in the West, in the Muslim world as well. And people are saying that, you know, it's too difficult for us to preserve our identity because of the TV and the internet.
The challenge is massive, and the mighty stream is great, and the people, it is irresistible. But we need to put some kind of trust for them. I need to emphasize the fact that the only religion that was never ever assimilated through any culture throughout the whole history is Islam. Even the advocates of globalization, they are raising this issue again. Once they emphasize on globalization and whatever trends that they spread, Islam comes back. At the time of Mongols, when they dominated the whole Muslim empire, and it was a big catastrophe for Islam and Muslims. And we heard about it in Baghdad when it actually, the ink of books turned the color of the river into blue. And all of those happened, and Muslims were, thousands of Muslims, thousands of thousands were slain. And Islam was a time of weakness. But, and normally when they say a conqueror subjugates the others through his own culture. Islam conquered the Mongols, and Islam conquered the whole world, and it didn't die. And it is still keeping its livelihood and dynamism. So this is a kind of trust. Islam is still in the hearts. Still, Islam is actually activating. I'm sure that some people listening to me now, and they cry because they see their children, and they cry because they cannot resist. No, I'm giving them hope. They return back. They should actually be given another hope in Allah's mercy. Allah is opening the ways for them. And Islam is coming back, inshallah. And I'm sure if it is a pause, if they are away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a short period, they should return back to the train of Islam.
Sheikh, that's all very well, but there's also some small things that people sometimes put in to try and prevent integration, perhaps because they've misunderstood. For example, hating for the sake of Allah. And we have a lot of this in England, that people are saying that you have to hate. What exactly did the Prophet ﷺ mean when he said you have to hate for the sake of Allah?
Here there is a misconception about it, because love and hatred is actually are of two types. There is something which is intrinsic. Islam did not condemn a person to love another person intrinsically, meaning it is uncontrollable. The Prophet ﷺ, when he loved Aisha, not in the same way that he loved the other wives, he said this is uncontrollable. This is thing which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. Like for example, a person is inclined to love his parents, and if he even accepts Islam, it is impossible to hate them, because it's something which is built in his heart.
Of course.
And you are inclined to love somebody who does a favor for you. Even the Quran talked about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You are not going to guide whomever you love. So the Quran admitted that the Prophet ﷺ loved his uncle, Abu Sufyan, Abu Talib. The Prophet ﷺ loved Abu Talib because he made a lot of contribution to him, and he supported him and he helped him. But on the other side, the adu of Allah, the enemy of Allah, Abu Jahl, the Prophet ﷺ hated him because he declared his enmity to Islam. The point that I want to say is, Islam does not condemn that type of intrinsic love. The hatred that Islam talks about is, let me explain it for you. For example, when you have a father or a mother, they are your fathers and mother. You are not going to hate them. But sometimes your mother has she has gossip. She talks badly about people. You don't like that characteristic of your mother.
So it's the behavior and the deeds, isn't it?
What do you think if your father, for example, imagine that he commits raping, he commits a heinous crime, something that you intrinsically also dislike? You are not going to dislike your father, but you are disliking that act from him.
We're going to have to stop you there. I'm sorry, we've just run out of time. But Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much for coming on the show. We look forward to having you again. Thank you, my guests, Hassan and Malik. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Inshallah, we will see you again. We hope this has once again been a beneficial episode of Straight Path. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I found the light after the